Okay, in this last part of the lesson, we're going to look at writing our equation in standard form. The way the equation is given to you here is actually referred to as general form, and we have to make it look like the standard form that we were using on all the previous examples. And to do that, you're going to go through a process that's called completing the square. And this is something that you did learn earlier in some other courses, for instance, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, but I'll refresh your memory as we go through that. First thing we've got to do is just kind of rearrange our equation here just a little bit. First of all, you need your x's first. So I'm going to have my x squared and then my minus 4x. Now I'm going to go ahead and just leave a space there. Okay, then you need to put your y terms, so that's going to be the positive y squared, so just put your plus sign, and then the minus 12y, leave yourself a blank, equals, now your constant, you're always going to want to move it to the other side, which would require that you add it. Okay, so you're grouping, grouping together your x's, grouping together your y's, but again, leave yourself a space there with each one of those. Now this is where that concept of completing the square comes in. And when you're completing the square, there's a basic little formula that you need to remember, which I'll write over here to the side. It's going to be b divided by 2 squared. Now your b value, this would kind of be the same idea as like with quadratic formula, and you have to identify a, b, and c. Your b, remember, is referred to as the coefficient of your x. Like in this case, it's the negative 12. It's the coefficient of the y. So it's your x and your y that are to the first power. Okay, the coefficient that you have there is referred to as your b. All right, so starting out here, my b value is negative 4. Okay, so over here to the side, I'm going to take my negative 4, take half of it, and square it. So of course negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So that is going to be a value that you're going to add in that blank right there. This is always going to come out to be positive because you're squaring, which means this is always going to be addition. Alright, we need to do the same thing here, except this time my b value is negative 12. So I would have negative 12 divided by 2 and then square. So that's going to give me negative 6, and then negative 6 squared will give me 36. So I need to add 36. Now, you also have to remember to actually add these same values on the right-hand side. That just goes back to what you have always known about equations. What you do to one side of the equation, you have to do the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to add the 4 and add the 36. Okay, what you have ended up with here and here. We're going to look at those two things separately. Each one of these is what's referred to as a perfect square trinomial, which means when you factor, your two parentheses actually end up being exactly the same. So actually, if you factor this, you're going to have x minus 2 times x minus 2. Therefore, we can write it as x minus 2 squared. So see, that makes it start looking like that standard form for your circle. Okay, same thing here. If you were to factor this trinomial, it will factor as y minus 6 times y minus 6. Therefore, you can write it as y minus 6 squared. All right, all your constant values, of course, have ended up there on the right-hand side. Just, add those together. So that's going to end up giving you 49. Okay, now as far as getting it into standard form, you're done. You've got your standard form. Okay, so now we're to identify the center and the radius. Of course, that's no different than what we did a while ago. Okay, so from here I'll get my x coordinate, so that would be a positive 2. Remember, change the sign. And my y coordinate would be positive 6. Okay, so if 49 is r squared, then that means r would be 7. Okay, looking at another one of these. Alright, so getting out, first of all, just rearranging your terms. Well, I'll go put my x terms first. If you'll notice, of course, this time you only have just this one term that contains x, but we still want to have it first. Now, you're actually not going to complete the square on x. You would have to have that other term in which x is to the first power in order to have to complete the square. So just immediately go ahead and start with your y squared minus your 6y. Now we will have to complete the square on y since I have both of those terms, so go ahead and leave your space that you have there. Add your 7 to the other side, so now it's going to be equal to positive 7. Okay, so completing the square on y. Your b value for y is negative 6. So we're going to have negative 6 divided by 2 squared. So that's going to give me negative 3, and negative 3 squared will give me positive 9. So I add positive 9, which means I also have to add positive 9 on the other side. So this one has a little bit less work than my first example, because like I said, we're not actually going to have to complete the square on the x. Okay, next step. This is where you take this part of it and factor. So if you were to factor this, it would be y minus 3 times y minus 3. Therefore, we'll have y minus 3 squared. Of course, add your 7 and 9, so you get 16. Okay, so you've got it in standard form. Okay, we just didn't have to complete the square on x because actually the coordinate that I'm going to get from here is just going to be that understood 0 that we talked about earlier. So the center is going to be 0 that comes from here, positive 3 that comes from here. Again, this is r squared, so r then would just be 4.